So welcome back friends. In this section we will learn about exception types. So generally speaking, exceptions are of two types. It is checked exception and unchecked exceptions. Now checked exceptions are also called compile time exceptions and unchecked exceptions are also called runtime exceptions. So let's write that as well. Compile time exceptions, runtime exceptions. Okay. So checked exceptions are the one which the compiler forces you to catch, and the unchecked exceptions are the ones that the compiler doesn't force you to catch. So let's understand this with the help of a code example. So the code example that we saw earlier, this throwing example, here our code was throwing an illegal argument exception. But if we remove this try catch block, compiler doesn't give us any error. This means that this illegal argument exception is a runtime exception, because whether we handle it or we don't handle it, compiler doesn't care. Okay, compiler says it's up to you. If you want to handle, handle. If you don't want to handle, don't handle. I don't care. But there are some exceptions which the compiler will force you to handle. For example, if I say, let me take another example. So I will create a new class here. Okay, I'm just adding some code. So here we can see that in the main method we are creating a scanner and reading a file. This is the name of the file, non-existent file.txt. Okay, now in this case, if I remove the try catch block, you see what is happening is I'm getting a compilation error. You can see your compilation errors in the bottom problem section of your screen of your IntelliJ. So it is saying unhandled exception. Okay, it will not allow you to run this code because this new scanner constructor, you see it is written, it is mentioned throws exception. So in some of the method it is defined this method can throw a particular exception. So you can define it in the method signature as well. So you can define a runtime exception as well and a compile time exception as well. Here they have defined a file not found exception, which falls under compile time exception. So when you call this constructor here at line number 12, compiler says, dude, you are calling a constructor that is throwing a compile time exception. You need to handle it. Without that, I cannot compile the code. I will not allow you to run the code. So you will have to forcefully handle that exception. So when you are using IntelliJ gives you suggestions. You see this symbol is for suggestion. If you click on this, to handle it, there are two ways. Either you surround it with try catch block as we saw, or again you define throws on your method. Then the code that will call your method will have to either surround it with try catch or again define it with throws. It can go on and on and on. Okay, so this scanner is throwing it is defined that it throws an exception, which means there is a probability that it can throw an exception, but compiler will not allow us to run the code until we handle this exception, because file not found is a checked exception. Therefore we are going by surrounding it by try catch. You see, now it has surrounded it by try catch, and by default IntelliJ has added this code. We will simply print an error message that this exception occurred here. So because it was a checked exception or a compile time action, compiler was forcing us to handle it. Now you see there are no red color errors shown here, which means that our code is good to compile. Now let's look at one more example, which is of unchecked exceptions. Now here our main method is calling is this divide method. Okay, and we can define also arithmetic exception. So there are two input arguments, A and B. If B is 0 in mathematics, you know that you cannot divide a number by 0. So if B is 0, automatically Java will by default throw an arithmetic exception because it cannot divide a number by 0. Okay, but if you don't handle this code like you handled here using the try catch block, if you don't place this try catch block, compiler is not giving you any error. Compiler says it's your wish whether you want to handle, you don't want to handle, it's up to you. Okay, because compiler cannot detect at compile time whether the value of B will be 0 or non-zero. Okay, so you have to detect, then you declare it in throws or catch it, try it, because compiler is unable to detect whether there is a chance of an exception or not. That is why it leaves it gives the onus to us. You decide whether you want to handle, you don't want to handle, you want to kill your exception, whatever you want, you decide. Which is not the case for this file not found exception. Compiler is able to detect that there is a probability that this exception can occur. So it is forcing us to handle the exception, to put the code to handle the exception. If it occurs, code will get called. Otherwise, if it doesn't occur, then it is a happy path scenario. Code will execute normally. So this is the conceptual difference between checked and unchecked exceptions. Checked, the compiler is able to detect there is a chance of an exception and it forces you to handle that exception. But in case of unchecked exception, compiler is unable to detect. It doesn't have the power. So it is up to you whether you want to throw the exception or not, or handle the exception or not. It is up to you. So we can see here that our divide method is throwing an arithmetic exception at line number 21. Compiler is not at all forcing us to handle this exception at compile time. Okay, so the correct way of handling unchecked exception is not using try catch. You can use try catch like it was mentioned here. You can use this try catch, but this is not the correct way of handling unchecked exceptions. Okay, because you as a developer know that there is a chance of exception occurring, so you should not handle unchecked exception using try catch. What you should do is, you know the situation when this exception can occur and you should try to fix the situation. How can you fix the situation? You can say if b is equal to 0, then maybe you can simply inform the user. You can do system.out.println and you can say tell it to the user cannot divide by 0. Okay, so this is the correct way of handling unchecked exception, which is, you don't use try catch. You can use try catch, but you should not use try catch. Okay, so I can show you this as well. For example, let's start with the original code. So if we start with this original code, so I will click on debug. Okay, so this non-existent file.txt, this file is not existing. Okay, so it will try to scan or read the file, and since it will not find that file, we can see we inspect this. This is a stack, how this method is called, from our code to scanner to input file. So this is the top stack. Our code is at the last. Our code called the scanner constructor called something else, but this stack has an exception. So this exception is caught in the catch block. We have handled this exception, so corresponding output should be printed on the screen. It's just taking a couple of minutes. Let's hold on for a while. Yeah, so we can see this, our error message has printed on the screen. Now let's check for unchecked exception. So here what we are trying to do, divide by 0. So if we go inside this method and now we are trying to divide by 0, again arithmetic exception has occurred. We can see that this is the stack trace of this stack. Main method is calling divide method. This is the stack trace. Okay, so again exception is caught, but it is caught. We can do it, but we should not do it, because we are aware of this as a developer that this situation can come. So what we should do is the thing I showed you earlier. We should instead place a block here. Okay, so what we should be doing is, we should check whether b is 0 or not. If it is 0, we should simply log a message. We should not allow the runtime exception to occur at all, or the unchecked exception to occur at all. We should try to avoid it. Okay, I'm sorry, it is still occurring. You see, arithmetic exception. After checking, we should return from here. We should not allow this code to execute. So we are returning a -1, or we can return 0 or something, whatever you want. So this is what we should do. Okay, so after checking whether division is possible or not, it is not possible. So instead of allowing the unchecked exception to propagate, we should check it and avoid it by placing appropriate checks in our code. So our message as printed cannot divide by 0. So this is the correct way of handling unchecked exceptions. For checked, use try catch block or use throws clause. If you use throws clause, the code that is calling your code can again use try catch block or again use throws clause. If it uses throws code, again the code calling that code has the choice to use try catch or throws until we reach the end of the stack, which is generally our main method. So here, handling here, what we can do is we can simply write throws file not found exception. So this way also we can do it. But since main method is the end point, There is no other method, so no further handling is required. But if a method is calling this method, then handling is required. Okay, so always remember, for checked exceptions, either use try catch or use throws clause. For unchecked exception, you can use try catch, you can use throws clause, but you should avoid by placing appropriate checks in your code to avoid them at all. Okay, this is how it is handled.